when you are old and sitting in your rocking chair with your pipe and slippers, how would you like to be remembered?
That's a good question. I I would like to be remembered for being a leader in the industry professionally. I'd like to be remembered for the people I'd helped, whether or not that was via mentoring, coaching, or charity work.
Darren, great to be with you on the Entrepreneurial Engineer podcast, and it's good to be able to reverse roles this week. I think late last year you had me on the show, and it was a great conversation, and today we have the privilege of the podcastee interviewing the podcaster. So good to be with you, and yeah, really keen to hear what you have to say tonight. So welcome.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think one of the things I've been reflecting on since we caught up, Darren, is really the fact that you've gone on a very interesting journey to end up in the space that you're in. You've obviously started as an engineer, done a number of design and construction type roles, and probably uh, probably gone on a journey from traditional engineering into taking on a number of business type initiatives and really championing the cause of engineers. And I suppose I'd love to hear a bit about what led you down the pathway that you've been on, and some of the sort of major pivotal moments for you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, early on in my career, it was just all about just wanting to learn. I just wanted to learn. I was curious. I had a point where I'd just be writing a file note every week on something that I didn't know about. And I was constantly trying to find more and more detail. I just wanted more and more detail and detail and detail. And I wanted to know to the nth degree about everything about pipes, pumps, concrete, from the machines, how much petrol did they use, to how heavy were they, to what was the safety process behind how you had to do all your tickets, and really everything. I just tried to dive all the way in and then get back out as quickly as possible, like rabbit holes. I think a lot of people talking about them now. When I realized that things, and you always think, right, you're like, oh, yep. When I realized things cost money, I think that was a real, like, things cost money, right? So that concrete costs money, but when it's $330 a cube, or when steel is X a ton, or when that if you can shorten something or widen something or shape, that those changes have a financial outcome. And I saw that a lot early on. I was involved in a lot of design and construct contracts, and I saw what was a concept design be priced. And then as part of the role that I had at the time was to review the design to detail. And you could see that something had been priced, and then all of a lot of the stuff had come out of it, not by means of quality, but things had changed from, say, a trench to a bore, or there was maybe less structures because the alignment had changed, which each of those had flow-on impacts. And when you're working on the authority's behalf and even a consultant, you see that value of, well, hold on a minute, you priced one thing, but you're building another, and all of those cost savings just go, say, to a contractor who, is obviously, they're priced on risk. There's risk involved, and you can see the layers of risk and what that means. But that taught me very early on about how the decisions you make as an engineer to provide value or to avoid costs or to provide cost savings can have a really big financial impact. And I think once I sort of cracked that, that's when I was just always looking for a different procurement model. So at that time, moved to a detailed design in-house, and then a construct-only contract, for example. And that was very successful for some point in time. And then, now people have delivery partner models, and there's joint venture models, and there's a lot of other ways now with, different things with early contractor involvement, how you can work with contractors to have more of a shared risk approach. But that was something for me that was quite pivotal early on in my career, because I think if I didn't have that exposure,
Yep.
I'd just be like, and I think at some point in time, oh, well, you design, this is what you design, and that goes in the ground. But then when you start looking for best for project, fit for purpose, look at risk, and then look at costs and program to a certain extent,
Yep.
when you start looking for that before you start designing, I think that's when you can really add value.
Yeah, fascinating. And a few things that stood out to me. One of them, when you shared there, but one of them was, it's quite interesting that you've become so passionate about being entrepreneurial, but at the heart, you are still a an engineer, and the passion shines through in terms of how you talk about delivering value and solutions, and looking at different ways of doing things. I think sometimes people can move down an entrepreneurial path and lose for either by intent or just through a series of events, can lose their connection with their engineering roots. But it's still very much at the core of who you are, and I think that one of the things that I also thought was quite interesting is you talked about from very early on in your career, you wanted to explore, you like going down rabbit holes and exploring things, and part of it's your curiosity and desire to learn more. But I'm interested to hear was there a, a leader or a manager or individuals that encouraged that part of your nature, because it's not always embraced. Sometimes in a consulting environment or in a construction environment where it's very much about getting the job done, we don't create the time and space for people to really explore how can we do things better. So yeah, interested to hear what influences that you had that might have sparked some of that.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to have some amazing engineering leaders in early on in my career, and there was always a view that before you even asked the question, and I have this a lot now, and I'm mentoring young engineers, and saying, before you even ask the question, go try and find the answer yourself, and then it was Google, or you'd have to ring someone to find the answer. And I posted about this recently, and then you actually would realize, well, hold on, I actually don't need to ask the question because I've already found out the answer, or my question becomes more efficient and effective because I have the knowledge to ask maybe a different question. And so I was often challenged to, and if this happened, you go ask a question, you'd be like, did you do a research paper, or did you look up online? And you're like, oh no, we'll go do that first. And then you go do that, you probably find the answer, and then you'd be asking different questions that are actually having more impact or would have a greater or more beneficial outcome because you actually had the knowledge and technical competence to ask a different question. The other thing I had as well was I was fortunate enough, and when I was in Vietnam, to work with a brilliant engineering mind, actually many of them, and being exposed to things like water treatment, hydraulics, and like electrical, mechanical systems, to military, switchboards, and large stormwater management networks with like propeller pumps and lakes that fill up and down from one side of the town to the other, and getting a general appreciation of how water, in this instance, goes from A to B, and all of the systems and procedures in that gave me a very good understanding, not just of structure, civil and civil engineering, structural engineering, and how the water was held, but how it got from one end to another, or how it was transmitted, and how the mechanical components worked. That was the real moment when I went, well, hold on, like if you go on site, you can't just be or a design engineer. You can't just be the one that says, "Oh, I know how to design the wall." And you're like, "Yep, that's great." Like the wall, and it's very important to be specialized, no doubt.
Yeah.
But when you start asking the questions about the how and the why and things that I wasn't really supposed to even be involved in, but
Mm.
when those experts were there, and I was fortunate that they did come to, assist and deliver the infrastructure we had to, I was just like peppering them with questions, asking, well, why are we doing it? How does this work? What? And learning how to, like, we had one of the guys, he was like gluing the PVC fittings together and how to measure the bends. And, you're getting real life experience about how to do plumbing work, really. But as an engineer, being exposed to that makes you consider those things when you get to the next chlorination control room or whatever it is. So I was very fortunate. I was exposed to things earlier on in my career. I was lucky that I had some people who, in a way, took a bet on me. I mean, I was fortunate enough to transition early in my career, but I feel though what I did was I put in the hard yards to, actually enable some of that career growth early on.
I think that's some great insight, and that I think there's nothing that can replace site experience. And
Yeah.
even if you're passionate about design and planning and strategy, having been on the ground and seeing things constructed firsthand, having been involved in supervising those types of projects is so important as an engineer to help round out our capability. But yeah, so it's interesting hearing how profound an impact that had on you. And I couldn't help but picture you as a kid with your Lego kit. And I wonder whether were you one of the kids that was fascinated by all sorts of engineering things from a young age, or what was your? Tell me a bit about what sparked your original passion in engineering.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, loved a good cubby house. I
Yep.
mean, you did it right. As a young boy, mate, cubby houses were it. How you could balance, like I would be building a cubby house to figure out how I could get the old black and white TV inside the cubby house so I could watch,
Yep.
cartoons. I wasn't. I never really had I always loved nature. I was
Mm.
very, loved being outdoors and, perfecting the perfect BMX jump and figuring out like how you could get the trajectory with the tibber board, which was perfect to get the right, like that was, and you could clear the milk crate or whatever it was. Maybe a bit of physics, although I don't think that worked when I tried to jump off my roof with a plastic bag parachute. That one didn't go so well.
How many kids have tried to jump off garage roofs? It seems to
Oh, with a big plastic bag, thinking this is going to save me. Yeah, no, failed at that one, but no, funny enough, not really. I was fortunate that I was always I felt like I had a maths brain. I always
Mm.
enjoyed maths in my early years,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really until later on where I learned technical drawing at school. I was good at maths. I liked science. Had some good mentors. I loved geography, and then that led to understanding more about history, which then ignited a passion about structure. You learning about the pyramids and whatever. I was like, oh wow, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I thought, oh, maybe I should be an architect or do like, some modeling, like the design. What's it called? The mechanical design,
Mm.
and just fell into an engineering degree, which was very fortunate, I think. So I think engineers can pretty much do anything they want after they go to uni, and you see that all the time. I think guests on this podcast have definitely proved that. But I don't actually think I mean, I remember taking apart my Walkman, right? I took it
Mm.
apart and mucked around with it, put it back together. And then I liked it better without the case on because you could see how the rotary disc worked to, play the Walkman.
Yeah.
Other than that, inquisitive, wanted to know what's under the shell. But I've never been like, a lot of people say, oh, you must love like motorbikes and cars. I'm like, yeah, they're great and I appreciate them, but I'm not, I don't think I'd follow that stereotypical.
Yeah.
I like machines and I love big machines, don't get me wrong. But engines and things like that, I'm not, not so into. But structure, yeah, definitely. I think structures
Yeah,
are
interesting.
interesting.
And I think that one of the things you mentioned when you're talking about your childhood was about your love for nature, and I think that it probably both of us on our journey of our career have seen. I think the stereotype of engineers when we were going through school and engineering degrees was still quite focused on the technical, the solving problems, the concrete and the steel, and the if you're mechanical, electrical, the processes behind that, and through the courses of our career, we've seen how engineers are considered and how engineers consider themselves go through a real evolution around
Yeah.
the the role we play in the environment, the role we play in social outcomes, and have you has that been something that's inspired you on your journey, and have you sort of embraced that change through your journey so far?
Yeah, I mean, I feel in a way, and I don't want to be, crying poor, or, I'm not saying, oh, engineers, you are underpaid, undervalued. I think there is some level of undervalue.
Mm, well,
And I think it's a society thing. You have, your Opal Towers, or the engineers got it wrong, or, there's a defect and like people have to move out, or, yes, okay, a bridge may have collapsed. But you never often hear about, that engineer that came up with, how the metro tunnel went via some other alignment to save a massive heritage structure, or some decision that was made where someone had the technical nous to move an alignment that might have saved a koala population. Because usually those things are done in real time, and there's not many accolades for, I would think, a profession that people think is nerdy and technical and people don't understand. I mean, go to a barbecue and, and I always say, oh, what do you do? I'm an engineer. Oh, yeah, yeah. And there's this straight, immediate demeanor change to, and not often, but sometimes, to, you know, and you may start talking about the detail and people's eyes glazed over.
yes.
So breaking that, and I don't think it's about, because a lot of people say, oh, engineers introverted, and I'm like, well, no, hold on, I actually tend to disagree. I mean, some may be. This isn't a personality trait. This is a professional one, and it's really about how to change the narrative for engineers, in not just for engineers talking to engineers, but engineers talking to decision makers, influencers, CEOs, people who can actually pay to do whatever it is that you're doing, and also society. I think that I don't think engineers have done a very good job promoting themselves. The engineering brand, in my mind, needs a massive overhaul, and very quickly, in our country, because in England, Scotland, and even some states in America, the engineering profession is viewed very differently to what it is in Australia, and Argentina even as well, and even in Japan. I mean, if you're an engineer in Japan, it's like, oh, you're the top dog, right? Um, and and everyone goes, oh, Japanese engineers, oh, they're so efficient. So I'm like, well, yes, they're amazing, and no doubt. And this isn't about where you're from, or, even the education you have. This is about how engineers are viewed in society. And I think that's something that we really need to change. And I think engineers need to pivot on, very quickly.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think your the examples you shared about how engineers are perceived in different parts of the world is a really good one. When I was younger, I was working in South America, and in a lot of the countries there, they refer to me as Ingeniero Dan as opposed to Daniel or Dan, and the title of like doctor in a number of countries around the world, engineers used in a similar sort of vein. And uh, if you look at the breadth and depth of impact that engineers have, it is absolutely phenomenal. And sometimes it's not recognized or seen as easily as it could be. And I sort of think it's beholden on us and beholden on everyone in our industry to think about how we uh, champion that impact and get better at celebrating it, because sometimes we hide our light under a bushel a bit too much, uh, and let's yeah, most engineers are passionate about what they do, and how do we let that passion shine out in how we communicate it. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the one that comes to mind is they're doing a bit of a speech the other day, and you're going, oh, that column, an engineer designed that. The glass, that had to have a thickness that someone had to design for some other reason. There's engineering impact all around us,
Yep.
and the thing that I find that may just be a generational thing, but from say science or STEM. So you look at STEM and then how that's, I think getting some resurgent. And funnily enough, I had a great discussion with someone the other night about STEM and why it's called STEM. And he's a computer scientist, so he's like, well, science is number one. You're just a lowly third, right? And we're having this big discussion about that. And I said, oh, it should be ETSM, and we're coming up with different acronyms, and STEM obviously just rolls off the tongue, so that's why it was. So the point was more about how people envisage what STEM actually means, one. But then I think, two, there's been a missing gap. There's definitely been a gap between what an engineer actually does, which I don't think anyone really knows, like in society, and then the outcome, the house, the bridge, the whatever. Everyone knows that, oh, an engineer was involved in that, but they've got no idea how they went from zero to bridge. They know someone had to build it, but there's no deep understanding of those things. And I guess that's not really up to society to have a good understanding of that. But they're the sort of things that, like you mentioned, I think engineers need to celebrate and figure out how to brand engineers as, like you said, problem solvers, game changers, sustainability enforcers, however you want to come up with buzzwords. And unfortunately, it's probably going to have to be that way, because you are talking to a wider audience. Figure out what those things are, celebrate them, publicize them, and just make sure when anything big is happening that there's some level of recognition for those gaps, so that society can come along for the ride.
I think that's really, really true. And I mean, I wonder, given that there's such a focus by society now on renewable energy, climate change, sustainability, there is an opportunity because in the past, engineers might have been thought about it. I think the typical statement, engineers build bridges, or they build design roads, or whatever it is. But we can tie more directly the future of our planet to the roles engineers play in making that a reality, in a way that people can see the direct links now. Without engineers, there wouldn't be wind or solar or hydrogen or hydropower or any of these other renewable sources. So there wouldn't be ways to make sustainable water supply. So how we understand what the drivers of society are, and demonstrate that engineering is the only profession that can actually solve those challenges, is actually a huge opportunity for us.
Yeah, that is our biggest opportunity right now, and that's why I'm so passionate about the entrepreneurial engineer, because the whole mindset behind it is about change. It is about being dynamic. It is about sustainability and using everything that's at your wheelhouse to be able to leverage your engineering skill set to have a better impact. That is it. So much bread and butter. But your point about sustainability is a good one, because looking at decarbonization engineering, as now it seems a term that's coined, but then also how engineers fit into that. That's the biggest. I think that's probably the biggest opportunity for engineers, to how to fit, because at the moment it's very science And I'm just talking in terms of not my perception of
Yeah.
what it is, more about maybe the public's view. When it can get to the engineering part, you feel like that's when there's maybe more of the doing or the building or the, like you mentioned,
Solutions.
the solutions. That's right. So, as engineers, I think that STEM piece is sort of bringing back in my mind again, and how we link those things together, so that we can tack on, and get those wins in society.
I think that's a huge opportunity. And I think you mentioned why you started to touch on why the entrepreneurial engineer, and I thought it was interesting on your LinkedIn page. You state, I love the description too, on a mission to help engineers be more entrepreneurial. And interested to hear what was the catalyst for you for starting the entrepreneurial engineer, and was there a light bulb moment or a series of frustrations or something? Usually something really fires people up that gets them to try something new.
Yeah. Oh, look, openly, a little buzzwordy, obviously. Um, I got a lot of people who I'd known or met, or, you never got around to that. What do you do? Because it was sort of a bit, never got, and had the interactions. And then you'd say, oh, I'm an engineer. They're like, I never would have picked that. I was like, oh, okay, okay, fair enough. And I still wanted to unpack that in my own mind and what that meant. The creation of value, innovation, design thinking, and how to break down problems and whatnot. I found there was a lot of parallels between entrepreneurship and engineering, between a lot of those things. And the other thing I found early on is that, if you can't influence as an engineer, you're not going to be able to get your design across. You're not going to be able to, influence the decision makers, in a process, or otherwise, commercial outcomes, contracts. And I think a lot of it going from engineering to project management. And I always think about entrepreneurs are just really good project managers in a way. So to think how you could go from engineer to project manager, say to leader, still having a technical competence, to be able to deliver something in a way to an audience, to actually have that outcome based on your idea, really got me thinking that, hold on, engineers are just really entrepreneurs in a way, but with a focus on engineering, and I think too, the other thing that came out of it, and it was probably a pivotal moment, is around business development, growing business, how to be a consultant. I think there's a lot of engineers that are just on big projects and they just do big projects. And I did that, right? So I had one project that took 2 years. Actually, I had a couple of them, right? Big projects, one project, two, and yes, the project was $150 million and had, multiple stages and work lots and all the rest of it, but that was it. And then you go from that to, say, a consultancy model where you might have 70 projects in a year, or you might have 15 to 20 projects going at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, you know what it's like. I mean, I know there'll be a lot of people out there right now who are like, I've got 40 jobs right now and I'm trying to juggle those, and some are hot, some are not. And that whole juggling and hats and fry pans and whatever analogy you want to call, or maybe just start thinking that almost every time you go through something like that, you're actually just in a startup. You're almost like trying to be an entrepreneur by juggling all these things and trying to get all these outcomes across multiple different things and clients and projects. So really just becoming there's an entrepreneurial mindset in there. Soft skills, power skills, what they meant. I started writing about soft skills and how important they were, and networks and whatnot. Like, you want to raise capital for a startup, you got to have some networks. What are you going to do? You got to pitch to people who have money. How are you going to pitch? Well, you've got to know what you're talking about. Engineering. So all these little parallels started coming up in my mind, and I just thought, hold on, the entrepreneurial engineer, that just makes so much sense about what I'd say is a real high level idea that meant that what I could do is try and package up everything that I'd learned and then help others and mentor and coach younger engineers and even mid and even senior level engineers. And I do now and have been since I started this, on how to package up all of that learning and then package it so you could go, here you go. This is all the things I learned and what I learned along the way. And this is how that might be able to help you navigate your career, maybe be more entrepreneurial. And the response from people is so mixed. Some people just want a job. Some people want a pivot job. Some people want to start companies. Some people want promotions. Some people want to move roles. And just seeing the response and I haven't openly, like I haven't really done a lot, and this year things are going to change on that. So it's super exciting. I've got a lot of things in the pipeline because it sort of just hit me all of a sudden. But seeing that response from the engineering community has been like so overwhelming. And it just made me realize that even if this conversation, I think we might have said it, but even if this conversation just sparks an interest in someone, or a young engineer goes, I'm going to start learning about computational fluid dynamics on the weekend. I mean, job done, right? That's all it ever will take. And I think that's what's brought the passion to try and give back through what is, this podcast, but also hopefully a more successful mentoring coaching business. 36% of listeners won't subscribe to this podcast, and that's a real shame. If you want to help me share the stories and help others learn and grow, then please like and subscribe.
And tell me a little bit about, and I love the example. I always love the fact that one conversation that touches one person's and sort of sparks passion in them or a shift in their life and helps them on a new trajectory is very inspiring and exciting. And it's great to hear that that's sort of what really drives you and motivates you. And but like in that context, so is there an example that jumps out at you right now around someone you've been you don't need to mention names, but someone you've been mentoring, or someone or something that's popped out, that an outcome that's come out of one of your podcasts, that like it'd be good to hear one or two stories that
Yeah. Oh, look, there's so many, and it's always hard to choose. There are a couple things. There is one that comes to mind. Had a mentee, went through my engineering career launchpad program, which is morphed now, but at the time it was a 6-week program, and I worked with them one-on-one to get them into the job market. And I do talk about this a lot, as a migrant engineer or an engineer who's come here from overseas or even graduated after a master's, that you've already got significant technical competence without local experience is a significant barrier to entry. And just to segue on that is, and I do talk about it, that it should be Engineers Australia or universities' number one focus is to get more skilled migrants into engineering roles, local experience or not, like just bring them in. I don't know how you're going to do it. I've got plenty of ideas on it, but I'll just segue about that now. But that's something that I think is a professional. But sorry, back to your point. So anyway, we went through the program, and yeah, she was great, right? And she did everything that we said we'd do. She actually went over and above. I went out to help her, to try and help her get roles. And someone that had significant experience but didn't know how to tell her story, didn't know what really to write about. And then I found out that, she'd worked on hospitals, she'd worked on precincts, she had experience with shopping centers that were like major shopping centers and residential subdivisions, water projects, water reclamation, and just this amazing experience, and yet couldn't get into even getting a role. She would have sent 300 applications, and it took, don't quote me, but something like I think it took 6 months, and she landed a dream role with a senior in front of it at a tier one contractor. And to be honest, I couldn't be happier. And I just kept working with her. We kept touching base, and to see her, um, that at the time, she was upset, right? You can imagine.
Yeah.
And to work with her through that and keep positive and keep pushing. And then now to see that and her, flourishing in that role. I mean, that's, it's still like, still obviously emotional, because you just don't know what they're going, oh, we're just going to move home. I'm going to give up on engineering. I don't want to do it anymore. And to have those types of conversations, that's not about what I did. That's got nothing to do with anything. That's just an engineer to an engineer going, like, just keep pushing, like, you've got this. So that was super rewarding. That still really touches me, that one. The other one that's interesting is I gave I gave a speech at university, and I made the comment that the best job that you can ever get is the one that you don't need to apply for.
Yeah.
And at the end, like, everyone put, how do you do that?
Yes.
Right. And it's funny because I've done that in my career, like, to the point where there's not really an interview process. It's more just having a couple of coffees with people, and you got a job, right? And I talked about, you telling everyone, and I've got a bit of a thing on that. Anyway, I have the networking event, which the next one's coming up, which I'm really excited about. Anyway, and I invited all these undergraduate civil engineers. I said, come along, like, it's free, right? Come on. And, oh, we've never been to a networking event before, don't really know what to do. And I talked a little bit about that. 4 or 5 of them came. First networking event they'd ever been to, right? In a room of engineers, contractors, lawyers, developers, other consultant professionals, and other engineering companies. Like, everyone's looking to hire, right? If you find someone good, you like, just hire them.
Yeah.
And I found out after the event that one of those people who came to that event, never been to one before, struck up a conversation with someone. They went for coffee, got offered a job.
Amazing.
So you're like, I'm like, job done. Like, what else?
That's
do you want?
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think you got to take those little wins. And there's always going to be people out there that whether you're online or whatever, they don't have those stories, so they don't understand your motives and intentions. There are those stories like that. And look, there are still others that, you're still battling with or trying to help, or, I had this thing where I wish I could just hire everyone. And I say that pretty openly. It would be amazing if you could just coach and train someone and just hire them at the end. But unfortunately, that has other implications, and it's very hard to do, but it's something that maybe one day I'd love to be able to do.
And I think that both those stories are fantastic stories about the impact that you're having, and that the stories that you're sharing and the examples are resonating and shifting people's perspectives. And I think, the first one around migrant engineers and that challenge, I think probably many of us in engineering have some of, if not quite a few of the best engineers I've ever worked with have been migrant engineers. And I think that for those of you who are listening, if you feel like you've got a little bit of a stigma about that, we see so many amazing engineers come in from overseas, and it's hard for them to get that first opportunity. But when first of all, they've shown resilience to move countries. They've shown resilience to learn a new language. They've shown resilience to put themselves out there into a culture that they don't understand, and that resilience and that work ethic and passion to sort of have an impact drives them sometimes we've got it. We call it the lucky country, but sometimes we've got it a bit easy in Australia, and there's things we can learn from the engineers and the different cultures around us, which really make our workplace more vibrant and rich. So the fact that you're mentoring and helping people on that journey, and I know it's high on Engineers Australia's radar, but hopefully we can continue to spark new ideas and ways, not just for Engineers Australia, but for organisations to make room for that.
Yeah.
And I think that the piece around not having to apply for a job, it's such good advice. I often talk about probably one of my greatest skills is relationships, and we talk about stereotypes. We put engineers in the box of solving problems and being really technical, but our ability to build relationships, build trust, listen, ask questions, learn, engage, and network are so important. And some of those softer skills that you're building and equipping people with are really important, because they help to round out both the stereotype, but also the capability of the engineers that are coming through. So I love that there's some of the areas that you're really focusing on, because
Yeah, just a couple of tidbits.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
really good. Love it. And one of the things I was reflecting. I mean, you probably talked about it a bit to a certain extent, but like in your day to day, because I often say to people, if you love what you do, it's not really work. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like and so, what are the things that that really spark you as a person and as an engineer, and how do you sort of embrace them in the busyness of multiple challenges?
Yeah. I tell you, talking about that story about writing file notes and diving into the detail on stuff. Wow. I mean, take me back. Like, to have that time again. I am fortunate enough that I do get to dive into the detail sometimes, but I have built systems and procedures, and obviously there's consultant teams. There's managers and engineers, and at any one point in time, I'm talking to 30 people in a day about so many different angles and tangents and ideas and solutions and problems. And I think the best part, I can explain that, and I talk about, like everyone talks about, you can compartmentalize things, and that is true. I think you can, to a certain extent, but openly, my day to day now is just the most urgent and important things that are in front of me. And I wake up and I go, these are the 3 things I have to do today, because everything else will be dictated by calendar, email, phone call, or the plan. And I set reminders and time block, and obviously you've got meetings and whatever. And I have that sort of pre-built into the calendar, which helps. And I think a lot of people, I love color coding my calendar. I can just open it up and be like, oh, great, got some thinking time, or I've got time for that thing. And it's blocked because I know that I'll need to have a look at some plans and think about it more. I think the other thing too is it's all about what you don't know. And I think I find that a lot of people assume, and going through hoops on things, particularly with things like site investigations and underground, it's always what's under the ground. And that's why I like to specialize in what's under the ground, whether it's, well, maybe not so much contamination, but it's there, and geotechnical conditions and structures, because how they behave under the ground is very different to above, which I enjoy. But yeah, just to your point, like the day-to-day for me is anything from whiteboarding, spitballing, meeting, strategy, ringing someone and saying, hey, like, did we think about that? And we're like, whoa, yeah, well, maybe we should think about that thing. obviously in meetings. But yeah, I just roll with it. I try to take every single moment for what it is. And I always try to think, is there something that I can, where's the value that I can bring to this particular conversation, and listen as much as I can to understand intent, and then just trying to be in the moment as much as possible. I see too many times people saying yes to too many things, and their inbox is crammed and they're in a rush and they're just rushing, but not going, hold on, that's not the right approach, or I didn't check that thing, or I didn't, and I do this now, and I've been doing it for years, where you've got the, on your email, where it will actually give you the reminder and do the spell check, and you got to press extra buttons to send the email. I find this really great because I'll do it and be like, yeah, spelling's all fine. And you're like, hold on, forgot a point. And that point might be the one that makes the difference to the outcome. So slowing down, I've just, a lot of people say, oh, you're so relaxed all the time. And I'm like, I don't get stressed. I did once a long time ago, and I had to take a week off, just way too overwhelmed, had way too much going on. So I'll always say yes to stuff. You know, I like to try and give away stuff, and then sometimes it comes back. And by that, I mean tasks or project work.
Yeah.
But I'm always like, look, if you can't do it, I'll just take it back, and I'll just weep it in, and it will just become part of that. And I think setting expectations with internal and external stakeholders, telling everyone what you're doing, over communicating. No one, I found, particularly maybe in this time in my career, maybe not when I was younger, but no one's going to pull you over a barrel if you said, hey, I didn't get that finished like long before it was due, and I'm still working on it, and I'm working through these matters, and this is where it's at, and I'm going to try to get it to you next week.
Yep.
I've rarely, and there are some people, but you know what it's like. Someone's like, it's due Friday, and then Friday 4:30, you get the email, oh hey, it's not done. You're like, hey, no. If you rang me on Tuesday and said, hey, look, we're having problems with this, and this, it's going to take some more time, you'll get it Wednesday next week, I'll be like, yeah, well, what's a couple of days? Now I know some deadlines have to be hit, and I appreciate that. But I've really found that if you can over communicate and set expectations, then it's better to take your time and get it right than have to revisit it later at your cost or liability.
No, I think that's good, and I think the seeking to understand, asking questions, listening, can really help you to then frame ideas or ask questions that spark people to come up with solutions. So I love that. I think that's one of the things that stands out that you seem to really thrive off is helping others to empower others to come up with solutions and sort of influence as well as do. The one of the things I was quite interested in is I think for some of the people listening is just hearing a bit about your what you do to what does the life of Darren Flynn look like outside of work and outside of some of your extracurricular activities. What does a typical weekend look like for you? How do you unwind?
Yeah, look, funnily enough, I don't really unwind. Ask my wife. I'm usually pretty go. I can sit down and watch Survivor, or I can chill out. No phone time. I love that. I think weekends is, I'm very family. It's every minute I get with the kids is precious. I heard a podcast where I think it was Hamish Blake said that you've got 10 summers with your kids, right? So once your kids get to say 5 or 6, they're up, they're out, they're at them, and then you really only got 10 summers. It's an analogy, but you've sort of got 10 big experiences in a summer or a holiday to have with them, and then before you know it, they're gone. They've got boyfriends, girlfriends, high school, uni, whatever, they move out. And that really, and I think I listened to it, maybe in COVID, I can't remember. But anyway, it made me just realize that every single second that you get with your family, you work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, what do you get with your family? 16 hours, not even half, maybe a little bit more, depending on what you can do with your days. So the weekends are precious. Uh, Weekends for us, like we're driven by a calendar. We've got a family calendar. So if it gets in the calendar, you got family, friends. I've got 3 kids, so they've got their friends and parents and activities and birthdays. Sometimes we just put a block and just say, we're not going to do anything on Sunday. We're going to hang out at home. I'm going to mow the lawn, do some gardening, and I love that. And then hang out with the kids. Just go get an ice cream or something. Just walk up the street. Don't do anything. We're not going to do anything. I think a couple of weeks back we went to Coles. I know it's sort of funny. I'm a bit embarrassed to say it, but literally, we didn't have any shopping, and we said, "Oh, we're doing okay." It was raining, so we're like, "Oh, we did a bunch of house stuff and some spring cleaning." We're doing things, but it was just hanging out, and then went to Coles, and then funnily enough, we forgot something, so we went back to Coles. and that was the day. And like the kids read, and we did maths games, and we played games inside, and it was just the best day. And it's funny, we talked about it the other night at dinner, and it was like we said, "Oh, how good was that day? We just went to Coles." But yeah, I mean, look, we're on holidays all the time. I love holidays. I'm big on that. Love hanging out with the family. So yeah, family first. If I can get around to golfing, that'd be nice. But other than that, man, it's a little bit of work sometimes. Sometimes you've got to flip open the laptop or do something and get it done, just to either finish up something, or you promised something that you didn't quite get done, and that if you spend that hour or two, it just means that you'll make a commitment to someone, and they know. And I always make sure, like when I tell people about work like that, like I always make sure people know, hey, by the way, I got to do this on the weekend, but I'll do it because I know it's important for you. Anyway, that's a work thing. But anyway, that's probably my weekends in a nutshell. As much family time, as much home time, but the calendar gets so full with the events. Like if you ask me, when's the next Saturday night that you have free, it's probably in May. And that's just how, that's the schedule, right? I just roll with it sometimes. I've got no idea what's happening half the time. I just rock up and try to tell jokes and have a good time.
Good. Yeah. No, I think it's good to have that space with family and to really, have the flexibility to make days where you just have the space to connect. And often it is connecting over funny experiences, like little things. Like it's not always it's about creating memories, but it's also about just spending time bonding together as a family. There's a lot of other questions that I'd love to ask, but we're running out of time. So I'm going to ask you one more question.
All right, go for it, man.
And bit of fun, but when you are old and sitting in your rocking chair with your pipe and slippers, how would you like to be remembered?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, I would like to be remembered for, I'd say, being a leader in the industry, professionally. I'd like to be remembered for the people I'd helped, whether or not that was via mentoring, coaching, or charity work, or something. I don't ever would think that I'd want to be remembered for some engineering thing that I did. Like I never had the I know it's funny because I reflect on people go, oh, I built that bridge, or I worked on that project, or see that. And I think one of the only above ground structures that was really impressive I ever worked on was a big reservoir. It's out west, and it's a big one. And I remember going to my kids, I'm like, hey, that's because everything else I've done is underground. And I'm like, hey, that one, I built that.
That's it.
Oh, big green tank, lame. I'm like, come on. Fortunate enough, I've been involved in some like playgrounds and stuff. In the later years, I sort of don't do that much anymore, but I enjoy it. Anyway, so I think being remembered for being a good guy that helps people. I don't really need much more than that. Um,
Yep.
to think that, you could say that you helped change a stereotype, to think that I could say that I might help some people get some jobs or whatnot, or accelerate their careers or become leaders themselves. I think that'll be more than enough. I don't see, in thinking about it, just being remembered for being a top dog and a funny cat. That would be the guy that you high five in the office, or
Mm.
the person who cracked dad jokes. That's probably it for me. Yeah, I don't really. The professional side, yeah, sure. If there was something you go, oh yeah, he was a great engineer. Yeah, great. That'd probably be about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I like that. I think that the desire to be able to look back and reflect on the people whose journeys you had a positive influence on, and yeah, the type of person you were, as opposed to just the things that you did, I think is really, really powerful. And I think it's a good summary of why you've started up Entrepreneurial Engineer, and why you're wanting to really help, yeah, create a new sort of model for supporting people. And I love the stories you shared today, and I think everyone who's listening, I think, is going to really enjoy getting to know a bit more about Darren Flynn. And thanks for taking the time to be on your own podcast. It's been
Oh,
really fun.
hey, yeah. Look, thanks so much. Cracker questions really got me thinking. I really like the slippers one. And yeah, it's good. It's good talking to you, because I feel after our conversation, I even got a lot out of that. And then this one, it's great because it does help you reflect on where you've been and what you've done. And you're right. Like, I think engineers just need to be better storytellers, and if we could tell better stories, I think that would help that society piece that we talked about. So hopefully, hopefully someone got something out of it, and on to the next one.
Yeah, well, keep inspiring people, keep living passionately, and yeah, cheering you on, and yeah, really, really excited to hear and see what the next season unfolds. So or the plans you have for 2025.
Awesome, mate. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Darren.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. Please like and subscribe. It helps us reach so many more aspiring engineering professionals and entrepreneurs. You can find us on LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube.